some of the UDFAs are in. We're going to talk about those and the Jets which direction they went in a variety of different spots. There seems to be some mixed reviews among fans, some happy, some not, which is always going to be the case. But we try to be as optimistic as possible because, let's face it, this is a big part of this team's future. The present and recent and distant past have all been a disaster, nightmare, steaming pile of trash, however you want to refer to it. That's been the last decade plus of Jets football and much of the last 40, 50 years, if we're being honest. So I'm Glenn Naughton, Jet Nation Radio, jetnation.com. Be sure to log into jetnation.com, most active Jets message board on the web. Of course, very active this time of year, specifically with so much to talk about, given the magnitude of what just took place every year, right? The draft. Before we get started, though, before we start on the draft picks and the undrafted free agents, what's going on with Jordan Travis? This is such a weird thing. I think we've officially entered weirdness territory. So he was in witness protection last year, which we kind of expected because of the injury and he might not play. But there was also an expectation, I think, by most reasonable people that he would be able to practice at some point during the year, right? I mean, I know he got hurt. He had this gruesome injury to close out the season. I don't think he needed, 10 months, 11 months before he was able to, lightly jog and maybe throw the ball around a little bit. So, no Jordan Travis, was never taken off the NFI non-football injury list, spent the entire year on it. And it was like, oh, well, that's weird, because at some point you think he'll get on the field. I'm not saying games. I'm not saying on the active roster on game day. I mean, even if it's just practice, the team sucked anyway. You weren't going to the playoffs. Like, let's see what the kid can do, even if you're just letting him loosen up and, or shake the rust off in practice. But at one point last year, Jeff Ulbrich, the interim head coach, was asked about Jordan Travis and gave this very sort of I wouldn't say a non-answer, but Jordan had a setback. He had a setback. And like that was it. He had a setback. And it's like, well, when and why and how much longer is he going to be out? Is nothing, not a single detail, not a peep after that. He had a setback. Okay. You're just kind of left. And it's like, all right, well, the season's nearly over anyway. So whatever it is, he doesn't get to practice for a couple weeks. But you don't know if it happened 10 weeks ago or 5 weeks. You don't know when it happened. Just kind of assumed it was around that time because that's when it was first mentioned. But then I thought about it afterwards and I'm like, well, that's when he was asked. What if he was asked week 4, week 5, week 6? Was the setback in week 2? I don't know. Nobody knows because nobody has said. Then a couple of months ago, Jordan Travis's agent comes out and says the Jets are the reason Jordan Travis didn't get on the field. They didn't follow the rehab protocol as recommended by his doctors. And because of that, he re-injured himself, and that's why he didn't get on the field. It's a bad look. Bad look for the Jets. If true, I believe the Jets put out a statement or comment through somebody that they followed it exactly to a T, which of course they're going to say. And then nothing after that. And then, which at that point, I honestly thought and I've said this before, for the agent to come out and publicly claim that the team mismanaged the player's rehab and they are the reason he got hurt, I'm thinking, I guess they already told this guy, his player isn't coming back. Like, my thought was, I guess Mougey and Glenn sat down and said, you know what, Jordan Travis isn't it? We'll let the agent know that we're going to let him go at some point. And then the agent can come out and rip the team, and that's that. But the Jets are claiming they're excited to have him, which, I mean, that means nothing. The fact that he's on the roster still is a little bit surprising. Again, but is he still rehabbing? Are they trying to avoid a law? We've seen the team face lawsuits in the past for mishandling guys and releasing guys while they were still hurt. Colicchio Semele, and there was somebody else around that time. They had a couple guys in a short time frame where they were sued for letting guys go. So anyway, the agent makes the comments. I'm assuming, all right, well, I guess he's gone, but he's not. He's still on the roster. Jets still say they're happy to have him. And then Brian Costello, and credit to him, because no one's really talked about it. But last night, when Darren Mougey and Aaron Glenn met with the press, um, the question was asked, like, what's going on with Jordan Travis? Because you didn't draft the quarterback. We just know he's been hurt and had a setback. What's going on with him? And Darren Mougey, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to talk about draft picks right now. Like, if it's nothing, why is it being treated like the biggest secret in the world? Just be like, oh yeah, he rolled his ankle. He missed a couple weeks back in, November. He's fine. Or it's bad, and we're not sure if or when he's going to be back. Like, it's. I was talking about this the other day, right? Like, the worst thing to have in a situation is uncertainty. Now the Jets might be certain, and Travis might be certain, and I guess technically the fans don't have a quote unquote right to know. But it's just weird to keep it quiet and not answer questions about. Like, first, we're not even going to talk about it. Like, something happened to this kid. We ain't telling anyone. Oh, somebody asked. Just tell him there was a setback. Okay, fine, there was a setback. And then 5 months later, how's he doing? I don't want to talk about that. It's officially weird, and it might be nothing. It, like I said, it could literally be a rolled ankle that he's fine now. I don't know. I just know it's super weird that it's like the Jets are like, let's comment on Jordan Travis without commenting on Jordan Travis, and we're just going to tell people there was a setback. We're not going to specify. We're not going to nothing. No information given. Not even, even like, oh, he's doing better. Because now we know he was re-injured. That's what the previous regime tried to not tell anyone. And then they acknowledged that he was injured. Now we know he was injured because the agent tells us he was injured. And Mougey, not even like, oh, he's coming along. Thanks for asking. Nothing. Just, I'm not going to talk about that. It's weird. It's weird. Again, maybe nothing, definitely weird. Jay in the chat, how are we doing, Jay? Says, like the Bob Dylan movie, a complete unknown. That's what every draft class is. And there will be the people, I know they're out there. Why are you grading a draft? It just happened. You don't even know what's going to happen with any of these guys. I say it every year. Grading it, yeah, wait a couple years, 2-3 years before you grade a draft. But you can look at the approach. The example I give is, and I know it's an extreme, but it drives home the point. If Darren Mougey had drafted a bunch of punters yesterday or this past few days, nobody would be saying, oh, let's wait and see. You'd be like, what the hell is he doing? So why can't you do what the hell is he doing with other positions? With everything the GM does. Now, look, I'm the first one to say it. I hate when people give up on players after a game, a couple of games, a bad training camp. And you see it. You see people do it. No, we shouldn't have taken that guy. Here, he dropped all those passes in training camp. You hear it. You see it. But and I always say, give it 3 years. Give it 3 years. So these aren't grades like, oh, it's official, draft's over, we know exactly what these guys are going to be. No. But I spend enough time watching a lot of these players, paying attention to this team. There's this thing called fun, and some of us like having it. And this is fun for people who enjoy football and enjoy the draft. If it upsets you that some people like talking about football too much, turn it off. Go do something else. We're going to talk about the Jets players, who they drafted, whether or not it makes sense to me. It might make perfect sense to you, and we're all going to have our own opinions. I'm going to share mine. So as we know, the Jets kick things off in the first round, pick number 7. You get Armand Membu. I think pretty much universally, bar a couple of people, fans were really happy with that pick. It fills a need. It completes the offensive line. You hope. Again, you hope. He could bust. We don't know. He could be a Hall of Famer. He could be a bust. We don't know. But the idea, the approach, the reasoning made sense. Good stuff. Nice job, Darren Mougey. You grabbed a guy at a position of need. It's not a sexy pick. Everybody likes people who handle the football and score touchdowns. But you know what? There's other guys you need to win your games. So I think that this is a good pick that everyone was on board with. There are a couple of different directions the Jets could have gone that I think a lot of people would have liked. I would have been fine with that. Would have been fine with a lot of guys. Would have been fine with Ted McMillan, who went with the next pick. So you're adding a ridiculously athletic, large tackle who played at a high level against elite competition. It's kind of a no-brainer. If you don't like the pick, you don't like the pick. I don't know what to tell you. let's pull this down. All right. No, draft isn't here. Draft is over. All right. Next pick, everyone everyone knew they needed a pass catcher at some point. You didn't get one in the first round, which again is fine. You go out, you had a tight end, Mason Taylor out of LSU. So again, you're getting an athletic, um, long, good hands, good speed, not not a great blocker, but a solid blocker with work to be done. Son of Jason Taylor, which I talked about it. It bothered me before the draft because I was so not a Jason Taylor fan. But whatever. He's not playing. He's I'm not gonna not root for a guy because his dad was an abrasive clown when he was with the Dolphins. Um, Fully on board with the kid. Good player. That's what matters. This is a deep tight end class. Kind of wondered if we would see them grab two. Obviously, they didn't. But that's just that's how it goes. Things don't always unfold the way you think they might. But you go ahead and you get yourself, and he's very likely, unless something goes wrong, he's a day one starter because you don't have a lot at tight end. Jeremy Ruckert, great story. Everybody wants him to succeed. Everybody wants the kid. I mean, that's kind of crazy. Ruckert, like true born and bred Jets fan. So of course you want him to succeed. Taylor, when he's 9, 10 years old when his dad was playing here. You see the pictures of him wearing the Jets gear at the game. That's awesome. Who doesn't want to see that? Fantastic. Even if it was a year or two that he liked the Jets. The fact that he's a kid at the stadium watching his dad play in front of this fan base, like there's fans in this, there's fans watching this right now who sat in those stands with that kid, watching him play with Ruckert and Taylor. How awesome would it be if Ruckert breaks out and Taylor is a hit and your two starting tight ends sat in that building wearing that gear, watching that team? That's awesome. So and look, I love Ruckert coming out. So here's the hope, and he breaks out, and adding Justin Fields as college quarterback kind of gives him a little bump. New offensive coordinator who maybe utilizes tight ends a little more. So maybe the new tight ends coach. Yeah, we talked about the previous. I mean, we didn't see any tight ends get better while they were here under Middleton. As likable as he was, and as much as everybody liked him, you just didn't see production at all from the tight ends. So that's I think that this is a situation where at some point develop a damn tight end, whether it's Ruckert, Taylor, both Smart. Don't forget him. There's you got young guys on here that are going to need some development, some what's the word I'm looking for? Mentoring. That's the one thing you don't have. You don't have that veteran tight end on the roster. With Conklin gone, it's kind of blind leading the blind, so to speak. But we'll see how he works out. But again, you can't dislike the approach. Position of need, he grabs the top player at that position, and with pick 42. Like I said, big target. I mean, most tight ends nowadays, you don't see a lot of tight ends that aren't 6'4" minimum. 6'5", 6'6" seems to be the excuse me, the growing norm. Taylor, of course, being 6'5". Then with pick 73, Azariah Thomas, corner out of Florida State, prototypical what Aaron Glenn is looking for. Another big guy, long, wingspan, insane, arm length, off the charts. I forget what the number is. I don't need to look at the number. You just watch him play. You look at a couple pictures and it's like, Jesus, the guy's got arms for days. Right? Fantastic. Him and Sauce. Where's he going to play? And I think it's important in looking at this draft. Now, look, the team isn't going to come out and say it, but it sure looks to me like they know they're not going to contend. They're not trying to get guys who are going to step in and play right now and help this team. Like Aaron Glenn said, you might get some injuries and some of these guys will get on the field. Yeah, fair enough. What team does that not apply to? Of course, your backups might play if your starters get hurt, And that was kind of what Aaron Glenn said about some of these guys. Oh, these guys will be backups if someone gets hurt. Yeah, that's what we get that. So he goes with Azariah Thomas, who has fine attributes, speed lacking, 4.58, but as Aaron Glenn said, and as Richard Sherman's always the example, right? You don't have to have elite speed if you have good technique. And this kid shows good feet. He shows good range. So I liked him as a player. But as far as the approach, it's like, well, couldn't you have gotten someone that's going to contribute now and down the road? Um, you have other needs where there were players you could have taken who would, contribute right away. But again, keeping in mind, they probably realize they're not going to win anything right away. So it's okay if you draft a guy who's going to contribute in 2 or 3 years because maybe that's the target for when you're competitive. But you get Thomas, add him as a day 2 guy. Then you go into day 3. Here was the head scratcher, the biggest head scratcher of the class, in my opinion. And I know other people have been critical. I saw when the Jets had him in for a 30 visit, Arian Smith. I've said it before that the word that jumped out to me when I watch him on film, and I said this in the forums on Jet Nation weeks ago when they had him in for a 30 visit. I said it's like a jackrabbit. Just boom. Like the second the ball snapped, he's gone. Shot out of a cannon. Good luck keeping up with that guy. If you don't get him off his route or jam him at the line, you're in big trouble. However, taking a guy this early who had 10 drops last year, that's a lot of drops. 10. And maybe you're gonna have him and Alan Lazard on the field at the same time. And then on top of that, the injury history. He's been injured almost every year. So, I mean, NFL.com had him as a 7th round pick, UDFA type, which kind of feels more appropriate for a guy who had 10 drops and a broken wrist and a torn meniscus, just perpetually injured and rough hands. So I don't love that pick. And again, you can look, if he's great, you can come back and say I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have talent. I mean, I just started by saying good luck covering that guy. But if they've not been able to teach Alan Lazard to stop dropping footballs since he entered the league, because Mougey was asked about it, what about the drops? And he's like, oh yeah, he does that. But we're gonna coach him. Okay. I'll wait and see. And I mean, that's what we'll do with all these guys. I just feel like that's a high risk at that point, right? So you're drafting a backup with Thomas, and then you're drafting a high risk guy with Arian Smith, and there were other guys available who had good speed and didn't have 10 drops last year. But that's what they went with. Supposedly a monster on special teams. We'll see. Next pick, round 4, pick 130, Malachi Moore. I like this one. Solid, steady Eddie, not special teamer. Well, he may play specials, but his primary role, he should be a starting safety on this team. I would imagine you pair him with Andre Sisco. And now you've got a good young safety out of Alabama, fundamentally sound, good tackler, can cover, get his hands on the ball. Not a ton of interceptions, but he's got a good number of PBUs. The INTs are there, the instincts, everything you hear about him. Aside from watching him on film, I remember hearing him discussed by Rick Spielman, in fact, on their pod. It's talking about what a bright kid he is and, the football intelligence and all that stuff. So, and that's what Aaron Glenn wants, right? He's lacking a true safety. And the guys they brought in the building, I've mentioned Sisco. I like him a lot, but I would imagine they're going to pair and play together in that spot. It's a little bit. I mean, it's good to know you brought a guy in of that caliber, and that you got him that late with pick 130. A little bit concerning the lack of proven guys they have in that secondary. But again, if you kind of accept the fact that winning isn't going to happen right away, you're getting these guys now and let them develop. Biff says Moore can play strong and free safety, and he can. Yeah, that's the thing. He's a real move piece. He was in Alabama. And how are we doing, Biff? By the way, Biff's a big Bama fan. So I think that this is an opportunity to finally get a long-term answer at safety, because there's a lot of positions on this team, safety being one of them, where it's just sort of just been plugging holes for years. Defensive tackle, other than Quinnen Williams. Safety, there's a different couple of guys every year. Offensive line's mostly been because of injuries. So hopefully he can bring some stability to that secondary and they have a long-term guy. Let's see. Jordan Travis' injury was closer to the Bridgewater injury than just a fractured bone in his leg. Realistically, he should never return to practice till 25. Well, I mean, the doctors cleared him to return. It's just a matter of what type of workload the Jets gave him. If it was too much too soon, and again, the Jets claim they stuck to it. It's Travis's agent who's saying the Jets went too far and expected too much. So I'm not sure. I mean, look, without being there, without seeing the doctor's plan and seeing what the Jets did, we really don't know who's to blame here. We just know the Jets are acting funny about it, which isn't a great thing. So that's Malachi Moore. Round 5, pick 162, Francisco Maui Goa. That guy is someone I've been watching since his Washington State days. And I mentioned it last night when he was picked. That Washington State roster had a lot of guys I liked that ended up in the league. You had Dan Henley, who was my favorite player that year in the draft. You got Maui Goa, who's now a Jet. You got Brennan Jackson, who's in the league. You got Shao Smith-Wade, who's in the league. One or two other guys who Ron Stone, who I think is with the Panthers. So just a lot of guys there. A lot of quality players at Washington State that I remember as I was watching them and just thinking to myself, like, they got a lot of NFL talent. Not necessarily saying these guys are going to be superstars. To go from college to the pros in itself is an incredible achievement. Making a roster, spending a year or two in the league, that's something. Not like 1% of college players get to do that. And Washington State that year had a bunch of guys who have done that. And they're not a team that people think about as, oh, Washington State, they just churn out a ton of talent. NFL talent. That not as much as they did a couple of years ago. So good job there. Hopping back in the chat real quick. If there's litigation, the Jets are better served not saying anything regarding Jordan. And that's, again, that, as I said, they have faced lawsuits in the past, and that could be part of it. That could be why they're being so secretive. But even with that being the case, they wouldn't want that to be public knowledge before it has to be. So I can see where they wouldn't say we can't comment on that. Because then right away, and they don't want that in the news any longer than it has to be. If there is litigation and there is a settlement, they're going to want that in and out of the news as quickly as possible. So to comment on it now, so that's a good point. That's a good point, Chew. Let's see. Yeah, Biff mentions the migraine, dude. I was not. If you were with me for the live stream last night, you saw me cut off after round 5, partly because of the headache, partly because the draft just went away on my laptop that I was streaming it. Within 10 minutes, I was out cold, head pounding. Thanks. Woke up to great news. Woke up, tagged in a post that the Jets added Brady Cook. We'll get into that in a minute. Finish up with the drafted players first. And I see your comment there, Biff. That is a major thing that we are going to talk about. So they get Maui Goa, not a household name, but they get him in the 5th. They get him. He transferred from Washington State to Miami. Just a theme I noticed with a couple of these guys they drafted, like solid all around players, solid against the run, solid against the pass, even if they're not dominant in one area, but they can hold their own and they're capable in multiple areas. And Maui Goa fits that description. He's got a brother who also plays for Miami, Francis Maui Goa, offensive tackle. He might be in the draft this year. Let's see, Samoan heritage, which I did know. Let's see, yeah, physical guy. They've got that in the scouting report here. But some of the clips, I believe I tweeted out some of his clips of his highlights. I know I've got a bunch of those on the in the highlight folder. After Maui Goa, that was round 5. Final pick, they trade up for a second time and they take Tyler Barron, and he's another one that fits that description. And I know I tweeted out some clips earlier. Take a look at JNRadio_Glenn. In fact, it's right there on the screen. Give that a follow. Take a look. I tweeted out a handful of plays from Barron back in his Tennessee days. Didn't watch a ton of him this year. Watched them last year. I did joke about how, and I tweeted out how he threw himself to the ground on a couple of games where it looked like they needed to stop the clock. And as I said, I was joking. If he was genuinely injured, that would be shocking because I'm sure I saw it 3 times. I only recorded it twice, but I'm sure there were 3 different plays where he literally was just standing there and then fell to the ground and grabbed his ankle as if he'd done something to injure himself. And I think that was just an effort to stop the clock. So that's your draft class. Grading it again. more, if we're just grading the approach, I'm going with a C. I know everyone likes throwing around A's, and this is just my opinion, and that's what it is. But you didn't get a defensive tackle. How does that happen? In a draft that is arguably the deepest you'll ever see at defensive tackle. Round after round after there's somebody on the board every round. And as I said, for years now, this team just keeps plugging in one journeyman after another next to Quinnen Williams, doing nothing to bring in a guy who can be the guy that he can build chemistry with and be an impactful player with. Just constantly grabbing guys off, off the I don't want to say scrap heap because some of them they've gotten some solid players, but like a different couple of guys every year. And Solomon Thomas, listen, Walter Payton, Man of the Year stuff, great, love it, wonderful human being, not a great football player, not a guy who I'm like, I gotta have that guy every year. I gotta keep giving him 1 year deal so he doesn't get away, which was what Robert Saleh was doing with him. So now you've gone out and you've signed a bunch of guys, backups, journeymen. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they're definitely drafting at least one tackle, maybe two, because they need some. None. Not a single tackle. Buffalo Bills. There's a reason why the Bills are good, and it ain't just Josh Allen. They drafted a couple. They jumped the Jets twice. They draft one each. I'll tell you what, if the Jets were planning on taking both those guys and the Bills did what they did, the Jets have a leak in the building. I mean, to have a division rival hop over you twice and take a defensive tackle, and you end up with none, and they've got two, somebody's talking. And, listen, you do hear it, right? I remember years ago with the Sam Darnold thing, and I talked to one former scout who said that I asked him his thought, like, did the Jets pull the trigger too soon? Because remember, the Jets made that trade really early. And I said, did the Jets make that trade too soon? That it felt like they left themselves open for someone else to leapfrog them. And he said, if the Jets did that, then they absolutely had intel on the Giants, and they knew the Giants were drafting Saquon and not trading. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I wouldn't be too happy if I was the Giants and somebody in my building gave the Jets those assurances, and that turned out to be true. And then we heard years later, I forget who reported it, but that did come out eventually. I remember a reporter saying the way that whole draft unfolded was the Jets had prior knowledge that Saquon Barkley was going to them, that the Giants were taking Saquon, and there was no way they were trading down. That's why the Jets felt safe to trade up and they wouldn't get leapfrogged. It's like, wow, so somebody in that building did leak it. So is someone in a building of Buffalo friendly with someone with the Jets and they're just shooting the breeze? I don't know. It just seems weird. It seems weird, doesn't it? That you're in desperate need of help at defensive tackle, and twice your division rival jumps you in the same draft, and both times they take a defensive tackle. But no matter what happened, no matter how you look at it, no DTs added to this draft class. That's a huge, huge fail. Especially, where you took the corner. And I get you love the corner and you might be a great player, but again, this is where they're not planning on winning right away. So maybe they address DT next year. It's not all, they're not building a Super Bowl roster right now. They're building a team that can figure out a way to maybe finish somewhere in the neighborhood of 500, because God knows it's been a long time since they've done that. So the bar is very low, and they're just they're putting together a team that is just looking to improve. We'll hop in the chat here for a second before we get on to the UDFAs. Amber says Cook may surprise. Cook is my number one guy. I've been banging the Brady Cook drum for, well, really, I think I got some tweets on him from a year or two ago saying, like, can't wait to see this guy next year. Good player. Mougey talk about the IDL room was Itzikian. It wasn't great. I mean, they asked him why he didn't take a quarterback. He said, we were going to get a UDFA. And I'm sitting here saying I love the Brady Cook thing, but I mean, if you're going into a draft and you're like, we need a quarterback, we'll grab an undrafted guy. Okay. I guess that's one approach. John Hoyneke says, greetings from Strong Island. I have mixed feelings about the draft. Hope the picks turn out well. I think and hope they will all do well, but the proof's got to be, or the proof is on game day. Exactly. Like I said, we don't know how any of these guys are going to turn out. Any of these guys can be an all-pro. Any of these guys can be a bust. I understand that. But and John understands that, obviously. I mean, you can't. No one's saying these guys are great or they're not. No one's turning in any final verdicts. But there are some things you see on film that you really like with some of these guys. Again, Membu, absolute monster. Taylor, I think Taylor. I would have liked to see him at a school where he got more targets. But important point. This was mentioned by a few people yesterday. The Nick Saban quote. Nick Saban saying, "When I was at Alabama, one of my biggest mistakes was not landing Mason Taylor as a tight end. That's big. That's big." And Saban seems to believe he can be a definite player. So I'm excited. Look, some of these picks I'm really excited about. Even the Thomas pick. It's not that I don't think he can play, and I don't think the Jets will do a nice job of developing him. I just feel like there are other spots where there are needs, but they didn't address those. We should have drafted Will Johnson. He's going to be a stud, says Charles. Yeah, I was curious about that when they did take Thomas. Why didn't you take Will Johnson earlier? But I guess if I forget now, I think it was Taylor at that point. Either way, he's a top 10 talent. If you're going to take a tight end, if you're going to take a corner, maybe you should have taken him in round 2. But that's, where is our $36 million investment going to play? Corner. I mean, I thought maybe there was gonna be a move to safety for Stevens, but they drafted a safety. So they're like, that's it. You signed Cisco, you drafted a safety. There's your 2 safeties, plus you have Tony Adams. So I would expect he's gonna play corner, which makes Thomas a backup, which means you use pick 73 on a backup. Rep in the Bronx says B+. Yeah, like I said, I say C. And hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's an A+ draft when all is said and done. And again, this is the approach. If I'm just strictly looking at the players, it's probably a little higher. But the fact that one of your biggest, that's what makes not taking a DT so weird. I mean, going into a draft, you hope that the stars align. You hope that when you sit down and look at your roster and go, here are our biggest needs, the issues we have to address most urgently. And then you look at your draft board and go, wow, there's like 25 guys that fit that need. Okay, so we take a few. This guy's got injury history. This guy's been in trouble, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so maybe you're down to 15, 18. That's still enough that you get one. They didn't get one. Morgan, there's Biff's statement. If there's litigation, good point from Chu. Yep, not taking the DT was concerning. Does he fit the Jack Campbell role, being a bigger linebacker? You would think that's kind of what they have in mind if they're because he is closer in size to Campbell. That's something the Jets. It's gonna be interesting to see if they run a defense that's more similar or that's all that similar to what Aaron Glenn ran, because the personnel here is so much different. The linebackers are smaller, the edges are smaller. I'll tell you what, if you're going to try to run these defensive tackles out there with these undersized linebackers, teams are going to run the ball down your throat. Like, that's my concern right now, is that with pedestrian tackles and undersized linebackers, is this team, when you want your linebackers to succeed and they're this small, put some big dudes up there that occupy blockers and let your linebackers run around. Do you see anybody on this D line who can be a force and occupy multiple blockers and create space? I don't. They say they're happy with who they signed, as they would. They're never going to say, yeah, we kind of screwed up by adding this guy. Didn't they add more in free agency? Yes, Charles, they did. We're going to discuss that next. Just wanted to go over the draft picks first. And yeah, as Chu says here, Middleton's a great, likable dude, 100%. But the production was non-existent. Conklin's first-year production on the Jets was never replicated. Exactly. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10 or 80 out of 100. Okay. Defensive tackles and free agency, thought they added some. Unless they've added, like I said, we're going to do the UDFAs in a minute. They added one. But again, a smaller, well, small, 300-pound-ish, more of an athletic tackle than a gap plugger. Any DTs in free agency? Honestly, haven't looked at the free agency list as of or any time recently. I've been so focused on the draft, but that is possible. That is a spot where you'll often see just when you're just looking for guys to eat up blocks, you'll find guys in free agency. But I was hoping for a younger infusion of youth and talent for a guy who could play well at multiple, in multiple roles. Let's see. Alan Avatar, what I took out of yesterday: Steelers 31, Jets 13, week 1. Caleb Johnson, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'm telling you, this team, I'm not confident they're going to stop the run. And if you can't do that, you're not going to win football games. But look, maybe next year's draft class is going to focus on things like that. We shall see. Now, the UDFA class, there will always be a couple of guys who come. I mean, I can't tell you a lot about a guy who went to a school I never heard of, right? And there's a couple guys I've done what little research I can. Some of these guys I've watched and I'm familiar with. Some of them I haven't. One or two of them I watched this morning since reading about their signing, so I could share some thoughts. But let's start with the couple guys who are quote unquote big names, draftable players who we thought might hear their names called but didn't. Quarterback Brady Cook, Mizzou, love it. Like him more than some of the draft picks. He can run, as he showed at the combine. I mean, he shows it on film, but at the combine, he had the fastest 40 time. We had Emery Hunt on from Football Game Plan, CBS Sports. He said that he thought Cook had the best throwing session at the combine, even without the combine. I loved him before that. I didn't need the combine to tell me he could throw the football and run. So you've got a guy who's got a good enough arm to make all the throws. Listen, he doesn't have a howitzer, but it's plenty good. As I said, he can run. He throws with touch, accuracy, good ball placement. Did it at a high level in the SEC against top-notch competition. So to me, Brady Cook, the pro comp for him that Emery Hunt gave was Andy Dalton. Make fun of Andy Dalton all you want. If this dude turns out to be Andy Dalton, Jets fans should be doing backflips. Again, and that's not to say he will, but love it. Love the addition of Brady Cook at quarterback. I think that he can be, if given a shot, if Jordan Travis, if everything is okay there and he's competing, I could see him beat him out. And I love Travis. I mocked him to the Jets. I'm not hating on the kid, but I just think Cook does a little bit more. Let's see. Thomas says, not to be negative, but this was supposed to be such a deep DT class. Major position of need. Yep. Jets did a great job of pushing DTs down the draft depth chart, and other teams became the beneficiaries. 100%. 100%, Thomas. Huge flub. Huge. You are not going to be sitting there looking at DTs on day 3 next year that are of the quality that they were this year. Plain and simple. You had a chance to get a good player late. Like I said, Buffalo took advantage. They drafted 2. The Jets did nothing. Micro Fox said he liked Cook. He was hoping. Yeah, like I said, I got the tweets. On the main forums in Jet Nation a couple months ago, I was like, hey, I started a thread and I said it's time to talk about Brady Cook because not enough people are, and I would take this guy on day 3 and like him as much as any day 3 quarterback you can get. So again, this isn't a bold proclamation that this is going to be the quarterback of the future, but in terms of day 3 prospects at that position, you're not going to do a lot better than that. Wayne says everyone knew we needed a DT. Got outmaneuvered when Buffalo jumped ahead of us twice to select one. Smith is a reach, which Mougey totally admitted or tacitly admitted. Yeah, I don't disagree. You got jumped twice by Buffalo for a DT, and then acknowledge that you drafted a guy pretty high who drops a lot of footballs. Look, Mougey's betting on himself and his coaches. Okay, I can respect that. I can respect the fact that you think you can fix this guy's drop issues. So we'll see. Let's see. Dalton is not a Cook's comp. He's really good arm and athletic. Well, Dalton did too. Think back to his college days. Andy Dalton ran a little bit. He wasn't Lamar Jackson, but he ran. He could move. And Cook can too. I'd say Cook's a better runner than Dalton. Dalton had the ability to run, but he didn't do it a whole lot. Again, back in his college days. Late in his career, not so much. Next up, Donovan Edwards, Michigan running back. This is a guy 2 years ago, I was sure he was going to be a a drafted player, maybe even a top 100 pick. Dude averaged like 7 yards a carry at Michigan a couple years ago. I mean, one big run after another. And then he didn't replicate that production, but he's been, over 5 yards a carry for his career. Fast, explosive, quick. Someone compared him to Braylon Allen. He doesn't have the power of Braylon Allen, in my opinion. But still, when you're talking about, and we've talked about this a couple times, Aaron Glenn talking about how he wants to bring in guys who are, who come from winning programs, who have that pedigree, who expect to win because they've done so much of it. And that's him. That's another player. We saw guys from major programs who win a lot of games. Could have taken Phillips later, probably. They claim Smith has wrist issues, injury. Well, yeah, he did. He had a lot of injuries. That's the other thing. I don't know if that's the best defense for a general manager. Like, hey, he dropped a lot of passes. Yeah, that's just because he was hurt all the time. Okay, great. But yeah, hopefully that is the issue, because to be fair, and again, this is to be fair, because I said the same thing when the Jets drafted Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims had a lot of drops his senior year, but he was playing with a chunky wrist brace after breaking his wrist. If that was the case, because I don't believe he had a bunch of drops the previous years. 13 drops in his college career, if I'm not mistaken, and 10 of them last year. Now, was the wrist all year? Because that seems like it was an all-year problem. I would think it would have healed at some point. But listen, I hope that was the issue. I hope that's cleaned up, and the Jets will have gotten a steal. Do I think the Jets had someone leaking Buffalo information? Oh, you must tune in late, Thomas. I said I don't know, but I said if I was the Jets, listen, I don't have access to the Jets draft board. If the Jets were targeting those guys, those DTs in those spots, then yeah, someone's leaking info. I mean, what are the odds you guess right on that twice? In which case, they got to do some house cleaning. Micro Foxy was banging the table for Dante Thornton, but he was picked a few picks before ours, and the Jets took Arians with that pick. Yeah, I wondered about that. I wondered if Thornton may have been on their mind at that point. But either way, he is gone, or he was gone by the time they picked. So that obviously Jets didn't grab him. Fatorma Moba, West Virginia. He's the guy I hadn't seen any of. Watched a couple of his games this morning. Really athletic guy, moves well. Watched him against Cincinnati. That's one of the games I watched. He had like 1 million tackles, like crazy numbers for a DT. I think combined, he had 13 or 14 tackles. That may have been his best game. It was his highest tackle total. That's why I pulled that one up to watch. But again, athletic, comes in around 310. At least that's what he's listed. I think he's listed at 305. But again, not the 330 plus pound run stopper I had been hoping for, but he's a DT, not UDFA DT. I'm not going to expect him to come in and solve their problems against the run. Jamarcus Weston, Florida, didn't play. Special teamer. He's an edge guy, so I thought, okay, let me go watch this guy's edge reps. He had played 6 years in college, averaged less than 3 tackles a year. So not a whole lot to report on him. Jordan Clark, corner, son of Ryan Clark, which is weird because Ryan Clark, not a big Jets fan. Many a days he takes the time to trash the Jets. But Jordan Clark, his son, likely a nickel. I'm trying to remember having watched him earlier. I thought he was solid in zone. And just a guy I need to watch more of. Looking at his snap counts, he was primarily a nickel, and that's where I would expect him to compete here. Quentin Skinner. Now, I don't know if this is a mistake here. I've seen it a few different places now where they're listing him as a corner. Unless the Jets are switching him over, Quentin Skinner's a 6'5" wide receiver. Now, you're going to make a 6'5" corner, go for it. And I'm wondering if they're getting a little confused. But see, he was a safety. Because same team, I don't know if they're related, but J.L. Skinner was the tall safety for Kansas a couple years ago. Quentin Skinner's a tall wide receiver. They're listing him as a corner. I think everyone's just got it wrong. I think you've got publications that haven't watched these guys, and they don't I saw that right away, and I was like, wait a minute. Are they? And maybe they are. Maybe there's a position switch. If it's not a position switch, the Jets got Skinner, who is a very tall downfield target, really good hands. Again, if you listen to the show regularly, you know that I've said I'm a big fan of Jalen Daniels, not Jaden. He's the Commanders quarterback. Jalen Daniels, the Kentucky quarterback, or sorry, Kansas quarterback. Been watching a lot of him the last few years. So I've seen a lot of Skinner. And he's just a big play guy. He's a 20-yard per catch guy as a downfield target because they like to air it out. Let's see. Okay, just making sure I didn't miss any questions or comments in the chat. So again, Skinner will have a chance to compete. Again, given his height, could be a red zone type of guy. Not sure how much he played on specials, but I mean, look, when you're a UDFA trying to make a roster, whether you've played specials in the past or not, you better be ready to try to play some specials. Dean Clark, Fresno State, quick, explosive. I think he's one of a couple of guys they've added because of their versatility. He's played safety, he's played nickel, and I think he's played in the box a fair bit. So he's another move piece on defense is Dean Clark. Aaron Smith is the small school guy. South Carolina State. Who can full disclosure is a term I was trying to think of. I've not watched him. Read about him a little bit. Emory Hunt, who I mentioned earlier, football game plan, because that draft guide has 50 million players, says he's athletic, can cover tight ends, can cover running backs, productive at South Carolina State. The next time I watch him play it down will be the first time I watch him play it down. Gus Hartwig, I like. Purdue, watched him a fair bit. I tweeted out a couple of his highlights earlier. Smooth in transition with, stunts, twists, pulls, things like that. He seems to, or not, when he's pulling, he seems to hit his target. And stunts and twists, he picks guys up pretty seamlessly. Better in pass pro than as a run blocker, in my opinion. And last but not least, kicker Caden Davis out of Mississippi, out of Ole Miss. Good from 40 and in, 50% or so from 40 and out. I don't know. Sorry. Now. So I'm not sure, if he's got a real shot to make the roster. But I'm not sure if he has a real shot to make the roster. But look, probably a camp leg, if we're being honest. But I mean, Zerline's got to get his act together, right? He's still around. He's still on the books for a lot of money. And if he's going to make that money, he's got to earn it. He's got to earn that job back. And I hope he does. He was a hell of a kicker a couple years ago. So there you have it. We will be following throughout the day, looking for any additional undrafted free agents. How many did they bring in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12. I could see them adding more. And I will be searching periodically. And if it's a player I'm familiar with, I'll throw an update on the front page of Jet Nation on the list we have there. If it's a guy I haven't watched, oh, you know what? They left somebody off this list. I just pulled up a random list. A guy who's, let's see, might have been 2 guys left off. See, I should have used, the reason I didn't use the one I typed up this morning for Jet Nation is because there was information on every player. So there were huge gaps between each guy. And I want where it's consolidated. So I pulled up a different site. But because of that, not everybody was on there. So let's go ahead and let's try again. So we talked about Brady Cook. We talked about Donovan Edwards. Jamal Pritchett, we didn't talk about. Watched him a couple of years ago when I was watching their quarterback, the guy we watched in Mobile, whose dad's a coach, and his name escapes me at the moment. But Jamal Pritchett, dude can fly. Elusive, fast, not a big guy, maybe a slot type. But again, if the Jets are looking to get faster on offense and get better at receiver, here's a guy that PFF rated him, said he was the number 1 receiver in the country against zone coverage, grading out at 88.2. And again, if you go to the front page at jetnation.com and look up the undrafted free agent, Brady Cook leads crop of Jets undrafted free agents article, there are clips and highlights in there of a lot of these players, to include Jamal Pritchett. We talked about him. We talked about him. We talked about him. Talked about him. Talked about him. Okay. And him. All right. Here's the two guys that I didn't mention. Leander Wiegand, German kid, right out of Germany. All I know about him is that he plays the offensive line and he's strong as an ox. Check out his Instagram. I actually put a link to it in the story. Go to his Instagram page from his pro day. He's knocking out 38 reps of 225, which is insane. 38 reps of 225, offensive lineman. So that's what I know about this guy, is that he plays football, he's German, and he's strong as hell. And he's a Jet. So in terms of, his ability to play the game, we'll see how that pans out. And last and certainly not least, another guy, again, versatility. I've talked about it a few times. I'm sure we know Aaron Glenn wants that. Jared Bartlett out of Cincinnati. He was a West Virginia transfer, played D-end at West Virginia full-time, moved to linebacker full-time at Cincinnati. At Cincy last year, career high 69 tackles, 7.5 sacks after moving over from the D-line. And gives Aaron Glenn another versatile piece to look at. Some of these guys are going to hang around. Some of them aren't. That's the way it goes. A couple might make a roster. A couple might make a practice squad. And then the rest will move on, maybe go somewhere else. Just going to wrap things up here. Take a look. Make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Any questions? Really like the kicker the Patriots drafted. Yeah, Borregales. I remember at one point, I forget what round. I think the Jets still had their 6th during the live stream. And I said, oh, do you grab a kicker in the 6th? And they obviously did not. And I think that was the one everybody was on, was Borregales. He looked like the most likely kicker to get drafted. And I know another kicker went not too long after that. Was it Duke's kicker? I forget now. Wasn't watching. Like I said, looked at the wrap up this morning. Rich says, let's get to work. Absolutely. Biff says, move the German to guard. But we don't even know. Maybe. You got to see him first. Maybe, I guess if you're transitioning him from a German league to the NFL, simplify it by putting him at guard. Guards are going to get mad at me now. But, just so he doesn't have that wide open space on his outside shoulder. We'll see what happens to the kid. 38 reps is going to get a lot of attention. And they weren't, well, did I watch? I might have watched into the high 20s. I don't think I just forwarded it to the end, and it was to see how. Oh no, he wrote it in the caption. He was like one after the other, boom, 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 boom. Then it said at the caption, 38 reps of whatever he wrote in German. But that'll wrap it up. That's the draft class. I give it a C. Maybe a C. And again, for the misses, not for the players they took, for the players they didn't take. I don't know how you go in with a glaring need like this, and there are 20 dudes staring you in the face that can make you a better football team and help you stop the run, and you pass on all of them. It is what it is. In the coming years, if we're just talking about pure talent, the talent of the players, and not the approach of how it impacts them for the future, then yeah, you like the Thomas pick a lot more. I don't like that Thomas is likely going to spend a lot of time on the bench this year. So I don't like that. But if we just say the talent, the player itself, you're talking about a critical position, corner, premium position, and a player who looks to have the physical traits and tools that are exactly what your coach is looking for. Your coach who played corner. I like the pick. I like the talent from that perspective. If we're just judging on going on talent alone, we're probably talking about a B instead of a C. And B that's not a bad grade. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it pans out. We'll know in a couple of years how this went. And we'll keep an eye out on whether or not they add anybody between now and, the next 48 hours, because that's when you get the frenzy of UDFAs. And then they'll roll into mini camps and all these things, and we'll be around to talk about every bit of it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Give us a like, give us a follow. Go to jetnation.com, register, log in, jump in the forums, and plenty to talk about. Plenty of knowledgeable Jet fans. Few lunatics. That's to be expected. Have a good one, Jets fans.